Thank you, Pulkit, for joining us today. So welcome everyone. This is an Ask Me Anything session on product-led growth, hosted by us by the team here at career.pm, but with a very special guest, Pulkit Agrawal. He's the co-founder and CEO of Chameleon. So Pulkit, can you share a little bit about yourself, about what Chameleon is about, so we get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, Daniel. Good to be here. I'm always happy to chat more about product-led growth. It's such a big movement for product communities today. So for me, I'm one of the co-founders of Chameleon. Chameleon is a software that allows product teams to more quickly and easily build in-product experiences that drive self-serve success. So, for example, onboarding tools or banners for upsells, checklists, micro surveys, and a whole bunch of different patterns to help product teams iterate on their in-product experience without having to write any code. And then about me, as you might be able to tell, I grew up in the UK, have a British accent, but I've been living in the Bay Area for some time now. Yeah, I write. I like a lot about. I write about and I'm interested in user experience, user psychology. I'm a big follower of Liverpool Football Club, so I know there's a big game today against Real Madrid. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Super cool. All right, so we have a few questions coming in on the topic. So I guess kind of to set things up and to frame the all of our conversation, I think that I'm gonna step in and ask you the first question and say, how would you describe product-led growth, and what kind of products would you say it's a better fit to
Yeah, so yeah, good. Yeah, fair question. So product-led growth, I think, is a repackaging of a fairly old concept around self-service. And how do we help people succeed with a product in a low touch or tech touch manner? So you can append onto that whatever you think. So in your business model, whatever, maybe different ways to define growth, but how do we use product as a channel to enable that growth? And that growth can be ultimately, obviously, has to be revenue growth if you're a business, but that might be a factor of product usage in some way. And so how do we help product usage enable that revenue growth? And how do we use product as a channel to market and to inform and educate users to help them find more value? So it's a good framing because it helps us more easily identify, like, okay, well, how are we going to use a product to drive growth? But it's really the core principles behind it are around enabling self-service, which allows us to be a lot more scalable and a lot more efficient when trying to grow a product or a business.
Right. So we've had a couple of questions on what kind of product type or perhaps market type would be a better fit for product-led growth. So people asking about, okay, so what can you do when the user persona and the buyer persona are different people, or is it a good strategy for B2B products? So overall, it's about, is this a good fit for B2B, and how do you approach this sort of technique to B2B products?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of questions there. Let's break it down. So,
right.
Which kinds of products is it a good fit for? Well, actually, it can be a fit for any kind of product. I'll give you a couple of examples of products that were maybe not the traditional ones that you think about for product-led growth, but Apple AirPods, when they first came out, or with the iPod, do you remember, like, they were white, and they were very distinct and different from every other type of earbud that was black. In the advertising, they made them white, like it was a silhouette with the white. And that's a really good example of the product driving more of its growth, because people started recognizing it on the street. It's like, okay, someone's wearing an Apple product, and that's why it became something that people aspire towards. Another example, from those who were familiar with this in the Bay Area for sure, is that Lyft, which is the taxi sharing or kind of on-demand taxi service. When it first launched, it gave every car that was that was driving for Lyft a big, massive, kind of like a furry mustache that they would put on their engine grill right at the front of the car. And it was cute and funny, and everyone realized, like, hey, okay, this is a lift car. And that's an example of product-led growth, because you're using the product as a channel to drive more marketing and success.
Right.
So we can start to think out of the box a little bit around, how do we leverage our product to drive success? And it can be pretty broad. It doesn't have to be, only B2C products in this vertical are going to be successful product-led growth. Let's think about it as a concept empirically. Now, in terms of software and in B2B and B2C, there's a question, is it relevant for B2B versus B2C? Absolutely, of course it is. And one of the big reasons for that is because the B2B and B2C are kind of converging in some ways, as more and more individuals are the buyers in both cases. Way back, as individuals, we didn't buy software, right? We might use software here and there that's shown to us or needed, but we weren't like actively looking and assessing and comparing and buying software. We're doing that in our personal world, but now we're also doing that in our work lives. We're saying, okay, well, I think this tool is going to be useful for me in my job. Can I put it on a credit card, and can I get some small amount to buy it? And Dropbox was one of the companies that popularized this model, often referred to as consumerization of SaaS. So what's meant is that a Dropbox customer could be an individual in a company. It didn't need the company's CTO or CIO to buy Dropbox across the company. That used to be the old way of doing things. Like you'd sell a contract at a sales-led motion with a relationship to the top executive, and then everyone would be forced to use it. Now it's kind of like, okay, an individual starts to use it, and then eventually it bubbles up and the company puts it on their credit card. And that happens in so many cases. Airtable is another good example. And so that it is relevant for every product. I'll pause there before I answer the specific, buyer persona, user persona question. Do you have any follow-ups on that, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, no, you carry on, because I think we're gonna work up to that question, because the thing it's about, is there a threshold where you kind of jump between an individual-led approach to a kind of more traditional sales approach? But carry on with what you were saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know there was a part of that which was like, examples of good kind of strategies for B2B products. Well, the onboarding is a really good example. Like, what does product-led growth look like for onboarding? Well, it's really, how can you drive activation conversion through your onboarding lifecycle without it requiring somebody to get on the phone with you or walk you through a demo or walk you through how to set something up? So, how can you drive that through that? I mean, Trello is an example to look at for some set onboarding, that's product-led growth enabled. Of course, all of the upsells. So if you have some kind of gating or restrictions, and then we'll talk more about kind of freemium and free later, but if you have any gatings and how do we drive upsells through that? I mean, Loom is a good example. It's a free product. And you can, there's various places where they encourage you to use more of the features, show you the value of that feature, how to use it, and therefore try to encourage you to upsell. So I think it's, in both of those cases, Trello and Loom, there are personal use cases, but there's definitely business use cases. We use both as a company, and it's an example of like that trend I was referencing, where B2C and B2B are merging in some cases.
Right, because I think the question there is like, you may have we've read studies like Slack growing, like different teams across the company setting up their own work groups, and somehow that becoming more of a company-wide adoption. So is there a point where is it only product-led growth? Is that mutually exclusive with traditional sales led strategies? Is there a convergence point where you say, well, there are too many different teams that are paying kind of individually from their own pockets, and at some point is there a group buy-in or an organization-wide sales opportunity that pops up and kind of comes from the traditional side of things, and you have an actual account manager and a sales manager? Are those things mutually exclusive? Can they be complementary somehow?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that somebody might assume, is that these approaches are exclusive, and actually they don't merge well together. That's a mistake. The approaches need to be used together. Absolutely. So if you're a sales-led company, you sell to enterprise buyers, you still need some motion around product-led. And we have to think about where that is and which edges and surfaces that touches. Similarly, even if you're a product-led company and you're all about self-service, if you want to become a big business and you want to sell to companies, you likely will need a sales motion and approach. And there's examples of that. Even Intercom, very product-led company, a lot of ways to unlock revenue from features. They still have a sales team and a bunch of people selling. And so actually the hybrid is most important. It's just where that balance lies in terms of how many salespeople you have relative to kind of how much growth you're driving from product. So for example, you might see that you have a customer that's using your product, and this happens a lot with developer tools companies. Someone that you need to kind of get going with as an individual contributor or individual usage, get it going. But you see, well, this person's actually from Microsoft, and they're paying for our usage on a credit card, and that credit card bill is a few $100 a month. That's fine. They're a small use. Then that grows, and it's starting to get to like high numbers of hundreds a month, and maybe thousands a month. At that point, you may want to lock them into an annual contract because you can support them more successfully. You can commit to that relationship. And so that's a point where you might want to have a sales conversation about, okay, hey, well, there's some advanced features available, or hey, look, there's some enterprisey functionality available, like maybe SSO or something else that would be a good fit for your team. We likely expect that you've got so many teams using this, you want to manage permissions effectively. How about we talk about kind of a different arrangement and agreement? So I think definitely it does require both. I think where that specific point is obviously isn't general. It is unique to each company. But I think if you see companies that are your customers that are maybe more than 250 employees, then they're probably likely comfortable signing annual contracts. If you can charge 10K and above, it's probably a good place to be selling annual contracts. And so if you're selling annual contracts, then probably your sales motion is going to be effective in that, because people do expect that to sign a contract, etc. If you're selling less than that, or if you're your smaller SMBs, then maybe you can keep on self-service. You can probably also still have an annual plan that people can buy on self-service. But especially if you've got good retention, and people aren't churning, then you need less support, less kind of human support, and so then it enables more kind of self-service, more product-led growth.
All right. So a big part of our communities are product managers that are at the individual contributor level, and maybe they read up on PLG and they want to start trying to use it somehow. But is there a way to introduce this strategy into an organization that isn't oriented to be product led? Is there a way to kind of sell this into the broader organization?
Yeah, there's, I guess, a couple of pieces here. Can you do some product-led growth stuff yourself as an individual product manager? Right. And then B, like, how do you expand that approach to your broader team or company? So the answer to the first question is, yeah, absolutely. You can definitely do some PLG stuff as an individual. So think about if you own a feature, and that's the product, how do you drive product-led growth for that feature? Or how do you drive feature-led growth? Right. And that can include a few different pieces. How do you drive discovery? How do you launch the feature? Where are you encouraging people to go try it out? Essentially, when you're promoting your product across the world, the internet is your canvas, and you're basically running ads or doing marketing and blog posts on the internet. When you're promoting a feature within a product, the product is your canvas, and you have to find ways to promote your feature within your product canvas, whether it's a little ad for that feature or an encouragement to try it, a banner model, etc. So that's where that's your scope. So try and figure out how you're going to launch it. Of course, you can do other channels like email and blog posts, etc., to drive discovery. And then when someone comes across to your feature, what is the landing page for your feature? Right. So when they're on the home page of that feature for the first time, is it just like an empty state with nothing in there, and it's like you have to figure it out? Or do you explain the value of it? Do you reference the benefits? Do you encourage people to try it? Do you have a very clear call to action on how to get started with it? So think about it from that perspective. Now, I've seen if other teams have that, like they're launching a new feature, they have a landing page inside of their product for that feature. So think about that, and generally, what is the empty state, and how can you show value really quickly? And then how do you onboard, activate, and retain your user with that feature. So your product needs onboarding, your feature might need onboarding. And we can talk about what good onboarding is later, but think about what the ways are to drive growth and usage from your feature, especially if your feature can drive towards revenue or is some way linked or correlated to revenue or business success. So that's the first half of the question.
Right.
I'll take follow-on questions before we dive into like how do you drive usage across the team.
Yeah, no, I guess so. How do you what would be the success metrics that we would be looking for if we're trying to go for a feature, let's say feature PLG approach? Is it how does that fit across the wider product, and what kind of key metrics and success criteria can we show others and ourselves to know whether that thing is working and whether we can expand it across teams?
Yeah, so generally there's you want to drive retention on a feature longer term, right? Like you need to have, like, without that the feature's failed. But that can take some time to understand. So a more leading indicator can be successful adoption. So what does that mean? So like activation. So you should define some activation metric. Did people use this for the first time? And then define the retention metric. Did people come back after they use this to use it again? So those are going to be your general feature success benchmarks. Now, if you're trying to employ a product-led approach for the first time versus whatever you typically do, then you might want to use some different metrics to assess, was my approach successful? You're not measuring was the feature successful. That's your general feature assessment, right? You're going to look for metrics to like, was my approach successful? So that depends on what your approach is. So let's say you've run a few campaigns to drive discovery of the feature in your product. You'll want to either A/B test, and some people don't get any of those things, and some people get everything, and then look at what is the adoption rate or activation rate across those two groups. Or if you don't have enough data, you can't A/B test, whatever, you can look at a series data. So historically, what is my adoption rate for new features of similar type? What is my adoption rate for this kind of feature? So I think that then depends on what approaches you're taking. If you're trying to drive upsell from that feature, that's what you would look at is, what is the conversion to upsell, or what is the number of upsells? So think about it, feature success and then approach success. And I think that's a good segue into thinking about how do we expand the approach of product-led across the organization. Well, the first thing is to show success. So if you're able to show success and say, hey, look, well, with this much cost, this was the benefit, and it's well worth it, and the ROI on this is much higher than what we've done before, right? It's a very good template to use in other places and a good blueprint. So I think first drive success and then share that success within the organization. That will help get people motivated. And even if you don't succeed, if you can at least share the learnings of like, hey, this is what we learned. This is the pieces that worked and the pieces that didn't work. Let's iterate on this next time. So socializing that from an individual contributor perspective will be one of the best ways. Obviously, if you want to drive product across the organization, having a buy-in at a senior level will be helpful, because the head of product or the head of the business will, might be the ones sanctioning, yes, you can spend this much time, or please let's spend a quarter fixing this, or this, you have engineering resources dedicated to that. If they're not bought in, they may not give you the resources. It might be a little harder. So at that point, do what you can with your resources and try to show success, and especially if it's valuable. That's business leaders care about cost and value. Like, it's a simple calculation. So try to help your leaders understand that.
All right. So I guess this question is kind of loaded, and we have Kirsty here, so it might be a little bit of a provocation, but we talked about being product led and there can be a complementary sales led approach to drive growth for the business as a whole. But where does marketing fit in? Is it a spread across these two areas? Is it a specific set of functional responsibilities within, if you're product led? How does marketing traditionally fit in this approach?
Yeah, I mean, marketing is a core component towards growth. And again, it's not mutually exclusive, just like sales led or a sales enabled approach, or marketing enabled or product led approach enabled approach isn't exclusive. So think of it a couple of ways. Product is a marketing channel. In marketing, you're trying to educate people to the value or the possible value of your product, or provide them other kinds of value at the top of the funnel before they've tried your product. So your product is a channel for some of that communication. So let's say you are announcing features. Traditionally, you're doing it through email. Well, announce them in the product, because people who are using the product also want to know about your new features. Or maybe you've created a really great how-to guide, like how to drive XYZ. Well, you're sending all of that in your blog and to your blog subscribers, and you're posting it on your social media, but maybe your existing customers also want to know about it. So in product could be a good channel. So there's some customer marketing angles where you people who are in the product, and they may not even be customers, they may be your trialers, or they may be in a demo environment. So think about, how do we enable marketing in that channel? And really, like, the goal of marketing doesn't cease. Like, product isn't going to be writing content that's really helpful up front, or teaching best practices, or doing all those things, right? Those things still need to exist, but it's about how do we enable that through product. And maybe, for example, in your as part of your features, you're not just linking to how to use the feature, you're looking to best practices and be like, okay, well, here are some great tips, or here's some use cases, or here's examples that others have used this, or here's a case study of somebody else using this feature. So you're trying to marry in the usage of the feature as well as education about that feature. So, product is still, and marketing are still really, really important components that should be working closely together. And sometimes we find that, you have a product growth pod, or product growth team, or product growth squad. And there's a great blog post that's going to be on a blog about how Spotify did this. But essentially, it's a cross-functional team of marketing, or product marketing, product, success, engineering, design, that comes together to try and drive growth holistically across a feature set, product, etc.
Right. That was actually going to be my follow-up question is, so how do you coordinate all of these activities? Who's driving this process? How is that, cross-functional alignment being driven, and how are these teams working towards that shared goal? Is that, how can you share a bit, like, good practices around this? You just mentioned having a product, a growth team, but are there other things that we should be thinking of, and other approaches to make sure that all of these teams are correctly being driven towards that shared goal?
So, okay, so let's say that we have, generally, if you have a, executive mandate to drive product-led growth, that will help.
Right.
I think having some point people or teams responsible will help. So I think maybe at the beginning, just delineating responsibility on who's responsible for what will be one of the most effective ways. So let's say you have a small product team, then you might want to have a single person that's responsible for driving onboarding success, upsell success, and across these key user life cycles, maybe virality or sharing. And that person could be a product marketing person, ideally with some user experience skills, or an engineer or a designer or product person, but somebody who can marry together some good copywriting, some understanding of data and analytics, and being able to assess success, as well as some good good design eye and good UX principles to know kind of what experiences are going to be well received by the user. So you might have an individual person. If you're a bigger team, then I would recommend a product-led growth or product growth team that has a few of these people. It doesn't have to be a full-time role. It could be a part, quarter designer, half engineer, full PM, that kind of thing. So you could have a product-led team that's responsible for all of these across the funnel. If you get much bigger, then you might have like a product-led or product team for driving revenue, a product team for driving activation and onboarding, a product team for driving upsells. So you might have different teams that are continuously iterating or focused on this, but it begins with nominating responsibility and setting that agenda very clearly on, like, these are the pieces that this team or person are responsible for, and this is some of the tooling that they have to allow them to do that.
All right, so I guess kind of the counter to that is, one of the questions that we got in was, are there any common mistakes that you see being made around trying to adopt PLG as a product, as an organization?
Yeah, I think some simple, I'll give you three. Number one, you employ an all or nothing approach. Like you're either product led or you're not product led. Now we already talked about that. It's not real. Like every company needs to have some components of product led. You probably already have some components of self-service. Think about how do you expand that? What's the one step you would take to expand self-service instead of thinking about, hey, I need to transition completely from sales led to product led. So that's the first mistake, is thinking of it as a dichotomy. It's actually it's a whole kind of range. The second thing is being output oriented and not outcome oriented. So it's like, okay, well, I want to create stuff. I want to ship feature improvements. I want to like add, in product experiences. I want to do all this stuff, but it's not really, you're not measuring success over time, and you're not giving yourself time and space to iterate. So it's very easy to get sucked into like, I want to just create all the time because it feels good and I can see visible, outcomes of what the hard work I'm doing. But actually, we need people to be outcome oriented, which means give things space to work or not work, and then reflect on them. And that reflection and analysis assessment is harder because you don't necessarily have a deliverable to show for it. Right. But you do need to give yourself some space to try that, to spend some time and factor that into any expectations that people might have of the things you're going to ship or work on. Is you need time to reflect and assess and iterate and improve, and there is a long tail for that. So that's the second thing, is to be outcome oriented, not output oriented, and that's a mistake some people might make. The third one, which I think is hopefully a simple one, is people creating welcome walkthroughs. And that is a pet peeve of mine, is that I land into a product for the first time and I get hit with a welcome modal, and then it proceeds with an 8-step walkthrough that tries to teach me about every key feature in the product. Those do not work. And we have a great benchmarks report which explains to you one of the many reasons or some of the reasons that doesn't work. But intuitively and from a user experience perspective, just think about what's happening there. What you're doing is someone's just got into your product. They're excited about trying it out. There's some need that they have that they think the product will meet, or there's some job that they're doing that this will fulfill. And you put a blocker in their way. And that blocker is your welcome modal. And on top of that, your welcome modal doesn't give them any value, because all it says is welcome to my product. Right. Do you want to see, blah, 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 like, this is so cool, like, welcome. Like, that's not useful. Or it's like, hey, take a tour. It's like, that is an interruption. I'm having to spend time and energy reading something, and it's not useful to me. Get out of the way. Or it's like, okay, next. All right, so now you highlight one thing. Okay, cool. Now highlight another thing. Now highlight another thing, and so on, so on. And then I'm having to read all this stuff, try to absorb this out of context of the actual usage of the product, remember it all, so that, okay, when I come back to it, let me remember all these things. And again, it's just like, it's adding stress and anxiety to me because I'm having to remember all this stuff without acting on it. So those do not work. People either go through them as quickly as possible or they dismiss them. So switch your approach. If you want to welcome users, welcome them in an unobtrusive way, and welcome them by providing value. Maybe that is like signposting the one thing they should focus on, or the one challenge you've set for them to try and accomplish. So if you want to welcome them in a way that's helpful to them. And if you want to onboard them, look at where there is friction in your product. Where are they getting stuck? Where do they need help? And then provide them very targeted, specific help at that point. Do not give them a general overview of the whole product. They have not come here for a general overview of the product. They've come here to solve one problem, or they've come here to try something out. So that's my third kind of common PLG mistake that I see teams making.
That's super cool. We're running close to our time here. Greg, you've been keeping an eye on our community questions and other channels. Are there any other questions popping up around this that we should ask before we wrap up?
Not so far. Well, maybe there is one that just came in. Yeah. The question is, if it's a B2C product, how do you release new features to customers? Not sure it's a great question. I'm not sure that I understand. Like,
right.
Maybe you want to address it anyway, Pulkit?
I think we have actually, there's another one on the backlog I just noticed. So we one big thing that we usually have around PLG is this notion you mentioned before about having a free entry point to the product and kind of have people use it. And there's this big dichotomy between perhaps a fully freemium model or a free trial model. Do you have any insights into when is it a good fit to adopt?
Yeah, in a very simple way, freemium is great if your product can be fully self-service, and free trial is better if your product can't be fully self-service.
Right.
So if your product can be fully self-service, meaning that people can find it, use it by themselves or with self-serve help resources,
right,
and continue to find success in it, they're sticking around, they're being retained, then freemium is a good option because you can let them use it and successfully use it with a very low cost base,
right,
and then drive some upsell into a higher paid plan from that pool of people. Versus a free trial is, if you need to get involved because it's an implementation, or you need to provide guidance or training, or you need to do any kind of less self-serve work, like a sales motion or some kind of customer success support motion, then a free trial is going to be better for them because you're going to allow them to try it, but help coach them and succeed with them, and then they can stick around. So that's a really simple way. If it's fully self-service, employ freemium. If you need to get involved, employ free trial. But you probably need to employ free something in both cases. The days of no free are over. So, go with one or the other.
Super cool. We're now at the time limit we had for today. So I want to thank you again for your time, Pulkit. So before we go, is there some special place that people should go to learn more about PLG, to learn more about Chameleon? Where should they go?
Yeah, so we have a lot of really, really great content for new people getting into product-led growth, for teams that are already employing it and want to go up a level. All of our content is very actionable. We want you to be able to use this content as a way to create changes in your teams, in your products, and in the way that you work. So I would definitely check out our content, which is available on our blog at trychameleon.com/blog. We even have a PLG kind of email course and in-product marketing email course. So a bunch of really great free resources on our blog. That's trychameleon.com/blog.
All right. So that's super cool. Thank you very much again. Thank you, Kirsty, also for making this happen. We're going to be sharing this recording through our YouTube channel and through our community. So hopefully a lot of people will also be able to go through these questions, and we can do more stuff together in the future.
Sounds great. It was a pleasure to be here, Daniel. Thank you.